So I have a theory that every Mass Effect 5 tease is actually connected to one secret timeline. And this timeline helps us piece together what each tease means, as well as predicts the next tease we'll see on N7 Day. Buckle up for one gigantic theory that helps us answer all these questions, along with the most important one, what Liara's secret plan is all about. Let's kick things off with 3 of the theory's assumptions. The first is that nothing will be canonized. The second is that most of the teases are literal as opposed to metaphorical. And the third is that the next Mass Effect has to sell a lot of copies, which means drawing on a lot of nostalgia from past player experiences. So with all these assumptions, my unhinged theory begins with the 2020 trailer, because it's in this trailer that Mass Effect 5's secret timeline is hidden. Every N7 Day since 2020 is connected to a specific tease here, so we'll go through the trailer first, then tackle the N7 Day teases. Alright, let's start from the top, and obviously, major Mass Effect trilogy and Andromeda spoilers will follow. The trailer starts with very faint sounds of Morse code, which sound like this. And the translation of this is N7. Now obviously later on in the trailer, there's a very specific nod to one N7 in particular, but we'll get to that later. For now, there's actually another audio clue at the beginning we have to chat about, but can't actually hear because it's been removed from the current trailer. Because copyrighted audio was used in the original version, the Mass Effect team re-uploaded it, removing the original audio entirely. So now in the current trailer, we only hear sounds of a spaceship beginning its launch sequence. But in the original trailer, we heard this. We now know that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched. Now in order to figure out how this relates to Mass Effect 5, we can't just take this audio clue at face value. We have to instead do what the franchise director of Mass Effect, Mike Gamble, told us to do. Right after the trailer first dropped, Gamble told fans that the trailer had a lot to unpack, and very crucially, to listen and look closely. He also added that he and his team spent days carefully crafting the secrets in the trailer, so each audio and visual tease here will tell us about what they're planning for the upcoming game. So to that end, we're going to interpret the trailer's audio clue first, then the visual clue, and then pair them together to figure out something about the next Mass Effect. And I think if we pair the audio here with the visual of the 2 galaxies, we actually get a clear hint about Mass Effect 5's villains. The galaxy in the foreground is the Milky Way, and Andromeda is in the background. And this audio clip is a line from the sci-fi novel The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, which features a conflict between Earth and an alien race from Mars. So this line directly relates to how alien Martians were watching humans on Earth. And in Mass Effect's lore, there was also a group of aliens who watched Earth from Mars, which were of course the Protheans. Javik confirms this to Shepard in Mass Effect 3.
Were you observing our ancestors?
Before the war, we cultivated species who showed potential. Eventually, you would have been offered a choice to join the Empire.
Now in the novel The War of the Worlds, the Martians ended up attacking the Earth. So I think this is also hinting at the same thing. A Prothean war against the Earth is incoming. Now obviously, the Protheans were all wiped out 50,000 years ago in the Milky Way. However, it's very likely that a group of Protheans actually escaped to the Andromeda galaxy, which is why this audio clue hinting at Martians was played while also showing Andromeda. And in Mass Effect Andromeda, we actually see hints of that Prothean escape. The Heleus cluster was filled with a form of technology called remnant tech, or RemTech for short. And the way it looks is remarkably similar to Prothean tech from the Milky Way. In fact, when a fan mused on how this concept art piece from Mass Effect 5 looks more like Prothean tech than RemTech, Gamble replied with, or maybe it's ... which I think can be completed with, or maybe it's both. This would imply that the builders of RemTech in Andromeda were actually Prothean, and we know that the mysterious builders were called the Jardaan, which I'm going to assume is connected to the Protheans. In a very obscure mission in Mass Effect Andromeda, we even saw hints of what resembled a Prothean in statue form, so there's plenty of hints that imply that the Jardaan are Prothean in some way. I do think it's possible the Jardaan are a different race entirely, which I covered in a recent video, but for simplicity's sake, I'll go with the Jardaan being Prothean for this theory. So what this part of the trailer is implying to me is that a Prothean war in the form of the Jardaan is incoming. And how the Jardaan will travel to the Milky Way is likely answered in the next tease. This next phenomenon is likely a bipolar nebula, which forms when a dying star ejects gas symmetrically from its poles. And once again, the audio paired with this was copyright struck and removed from the current trailer. But after sleuthing online, I found the original audio, which was this. Roger copy, Eagle Houston, you are a go for landing, over. Houston here referred to NASA, and Eagle was the codename for the Apollo 11 spaceflight mission. So this audio clue is referencing when humanity first landed on the moon. Now, how the first ever moon landing relates to this dying star nebula is actually connected to some concept art for Mass Effect 5. Kala Elizabeth covered on her channel how a lot of the Mass Effect 5 concept art featured dying and exploding stars, and Gamble had liked that video over on Twitter, so this focus on dying stars was clearly important, which immediately brings to mind a very specific mission from Mass Effect 2 that featured a dying star. During Tali's recruitment mission, she was investigating how the star Dolan was aging too quickly because of dark energy. And when a star ages too fast, it can quickly explode into a supernova and potentially form a black hole or even a wormhole. The concept art for Mass Effect 5 implies wormholes will indeed be a thing by showing us exploding stars and what seems to be a spaceship moving towards it, which is exactly what I think this dying star represents and will likely be the way the Jardaan reach the Milky Way, especially because a ready-to-form wormhole already exists in the Heleus cluster, which is this black hole here. In IRL physics, wormholes can supposedly connect black holes in space, allowing for travel between two large distances relatively quickly. However, there are two major problems with this form of travel. You have to first avoid the black hole's crushing gravitational pull, and you also need a form of negative energy to stabilize the wormhole's connection. And not so coincidentally, the Heleus cluster's black hole solves both these problems. The ESO falling into the black hole can reduce a starship's mass, solving the gravitational pull problem. And the Scourge, which is described as a charged absence, i.e. negative energy, would allow the wormhole to be stable, which means that the Heleus cluster's black hole is the perfect way to form a wormhole and potentially travel anywhere else in the universe. Back to the trailer, the audio clue is of the first time traversal of humanity to the moon. And I believe, coupled with this visual of a dying star, this tease implies that Mass Effect 5 will feature new traversals of space via phenomena like wormholes. In this way, both the Milky Way and Andromeda could be the setting, which we actually will see implied in more concept art later. Alright, so that's the first part of the trailer so far, the villains and setting. The rest of the trailer tackles the plot and timeline, the potential inciting incident, and of course, Liara's secret plan to deal with the incoming war. In the secret timeline, this next tease is connected to N7 Day 2021, which we'll cover in a bit. For now, let's hear the first audio clue tied to Mass Effect's lore. Since Arcturus Station was the primary headquarters of the system's alliance, this likely refers to when humanity first made contact with the Turians in 2157. And as this plays, we see a massive structure around a star that was explained by Legion in Mass Effect 2.
We told you the Geth are building our future.
But you didn't say what it is.
A megastructure. The closest analog you have is a Dyson sphere. When completed, we will all upload to it.
What good will that do?
All memories will be shared. All perspectives will be unified.
So basically, this megastructure that unifies the Geth will be important in Mass Effect 5. And if we tie this to the audio clue about First Contact, I think this means that these unified Geth will come into contact with an unknown race. Based on all the previous teases, this race will likely be the Jardaan. In fact, the Jardaan are probably why the Geth are now wearing clothes, but we'll get to that explanation in the secret timeline. For now, plot-wise, Mass Effect 5 will probably feature a first contact scenario between the Geth and the Jardaan. And speaking of plot, the next tease we see is tied to what humanity is getting up to, which is linked to this audio clue.
Humanity now stands as partners of the galaxy.
Humanity joining the galactic community is probably the point of this clip, which helps us figure out which blue planet this is, since only one of them was connected to humanity's galactic outreach. That planet being Feynman, which is the name of the award-winning physicist Richard Feynman. His work in the physics community heavily focused on quantum mechanics, which is funnily enough tied to the wormholes from earlier, because the black hole in the Heleus cluster is likely evidence of a quantum wormhole, allowing time travel to take place. Since this black hole is a Kerr black hole, that means that its warped geometry allows for backwards time travel, as described by HowStuffWorks.com like this. If Kerr black holes exist, scientists speculate that we might pass through them and exit through a white hole. Instead of pulling everything into its gravitational force, the white hole would push everything out and away from it, perhaps into another time or even another universe. We'll come back to this part about other universes shortly. For now, it's very possible that if the Jardaan used this quantum wormhole from the Heleus cluster to reach the Milky Way, they'd probably arrive way earlier than the 2820s. And it's very possible that the same could be done in reverse if the wormhole was traversed from the Milky Way's side. In this way, the timeline for Mass Effect 5 might be both the 2190s and the 2820s. The human-made relay from N7 Day 2022 might be for traversing these strange quantum wormholes, but we'll get there later. For now, let's move on to the final plot-related clue in the trailer: the audio connected to the Andromeda Initiative's arcs.
Arc 6 is away. Godspeed.
Now, this is the only audio clip that doesn't have a definitive visual to go with it, so I'm going to take it at face value and assume this is referring to the 6th initiative arc that launched, which was the Quarian arc. In the secret timeline, this tease is connected to N7 Day 2023 with the Andromeda distress signal. With all the connections to Andromeda so far, like the Jardaan, this is going to be a pretty important part of what happens in Mass Effect 5, but we'll continue on for now, because this next section in the trailer is likely showing us the inciting incident of Earth being doomed in the next Mass Effect. The audio here has the lines, "Watch that squad fighter, they're going to take down the Dreadnought, engines are going critical, and abandon ship." This is then followed by a massive Reaper roar, clearly linking the audio to the Reaper War in Mass Effect 3. As to the visuals, it's likely also showing us a relay from the Reaper War, that's specifically the one nearby Earth. And that's because this audio clip is directly tied to events that took place on Earth.
Major! Kate! Damn it, they're in trouble!
The Vermeer survivor spoke the exact same words as the ones in the trailer, and they said that for a dreadnought explosion in Earth's atmosphere. So this is why this relay is likely the one in Earth's cluster, which is the Canon relay. Now, back in my trailer breakdown from this year, I went over how the Canon relay is special because it's the only known relay to orbit a celestial body. Both Pluto and the Canon relay orbit each other, as seen here. And because of the orbiting debris around this relay, I had assumed that this was showing us a blown up Pluto. But I do agree with the audience from that video that the debris here does resemble ship wreckage more. So instead of Pluto's demise, what we're seeing here is likely ship debris around the Canon relay, which means that in Mass Effect 5, just like during the Reaper War, Earth's defense force has been annihilated. And to make matters worse, the Canon relay is no longer active, effectively making everyone on Earth and in the local cluster trapped. Remember the previous tease about the Jardaan wanting to war with Earth? I think we're literally seeing that in action here, in the potential inciting incident for the next Mass Effect. At the beginning of the game, the Jardaan will probably destroy Earth's defense force, resulting in humanity's home planet being at their mercy. And based on some lore from Mass Effect Andromeda, this is really bad. From what we know about the Jardaan, they wield incredible power to terraform existing planets or even create their own. And for some unknown reason, they also created the Angara, an organic race that occupies the Heleus cluster. These types of actions don't come across as benevolent, but rather controlling and even godlike. Creating worlds and creating beings are associated with gods across all cultures. And now these godlike villains appear to be threatening Earth and likely other parts of the Milky Way too, which means that another galactic war is brewing, just like the Reaper War. And this time, it'll probably be more complicated than blasting the bad guys with a Crucible beam, which is actually the audio clue we hear next, before the trailer's final section.
Is anyone receiving this? We've lost contact.
This line is likely audio after the Crucible blast went off, which rendered all QEC communications useless. And as to what this could mean for Mass Effect 5, if a fleet of Alliance ships does get destroyed, then contact with them would be lost. Now, in Mass Effect's timeline in the Milky Way, the Crucible being unleashed was the last known event that we know of, which means, at least in this theory, that everything we hear after this will include audio from the next Mass Effect, and visuals of what Liara's secret plan to deal with the Jardaan is. And it all starts with the craziest tease that has once again blown my mind. When I analyzed this before, I noticed the strong similarity between it and the local cluster we see in Mass Effect 1. The two glowing points of light match up, the general color palette matches too, and the band of starless sky as well. So this is totally, 100% showing us the local cluster. Or is it? While I do still think this is meant to represent the same visual, I no longer think it's the literal cluster that we're seeing. Instead, this visual is most likely the Milky Way's galactic plane. On Earth IRL, we can also see the galactic plane as a band, but only in places with very little light pollution like a desert. Which means that in both Mass Effect and the trailer, what we're seeing here is the Milky Way's galactic plane too. This is going to be extremely important when we get to the end of the trailer, so hang tight for the mind-blowing explanation then. For now, we'll move on to the voices that play when we see this visual. There are 5 voices in total, starting with this one. My interpretation here is emitted probe in A. Here's voice 2.
Anomaly readings all across space. Anomaly readings all across space.
For this one, I'm hearing anomaly readings all across something space. There's a gap in between across and space, which might be filled with known or Geth or even dark. If anything, I'm leaning towards anomaly readings all across known space. Moving on, here's voice 3. This one is really tricky to hear, but could be it's by the arc. Voice 4 is next. For this one, it might be they do match or they doomed us. And finally, here's voice 5. To me, voice 5 sounds like upon an unknown horizon. Alright, we'll come back to these voices and what they could mean in a little bit, because we need to examine this final section of the trailer all together. After the voices, what we see next is the planet that likely confirms Shepard's return in the next Mass Effect. Right away, we can see 3 moons orbiting the icy blue planet, which just so happens to fit Alchera's description. And Alchera, of course, is the planet that Shepard fell to at the start of Mass Effect 2. Seeing the galactic plane from before also confirms this is Alchera, because in Mass Effect 2 when looking up at the sky, we can see the very same galactic plane. It's pretty important though that the galactic plane on Alchera is seen in this particular orientation, which will become very relevant later. Continuing in the trailer for now though, we then see a space vehicle descend to the planet, followed by this. As a figure walks up what's clearly a dead Reaper, there's also another Reaper behind it. And then this. The same figure reaches down and tentatively removes an N7 insignia from a helmet encased in ice. This is likely the N7 helmet the insignia was removed from, and the piece that the figure removed. After its removal, they lightly brush the piece with their thumb and stand up, revealing the space vehicle from before and 3 figures in the background. Then finally, we see who the front figure is. The Shadow Broker herself, Liara Tassoni. Thanks to an obscure planet description from Mass Effect 3, it explains that methane pockets weren't barriers to the Asari landing there, which means Liara can breathe in Alchera's methane atmosphere without a mask. After this, it then cuts to black before we see that Mass Effect will indeed continue, and the tease that ties everything in the final section together. Behind the Mass Effect logo is the same Milky Way galactic plane as before, which we can tell from the matching squiggle of light here. But here's the wild part. This galactic plane is moving and horizontally flipped. And very crucially, it's now in the same orientation that we see from Alchera in Mass Effect 2. After this confusing final visual, the trailer ends. Alright, so what in the good name of Khalisah bint Sinan al-Jilani is going on in this final section of the trailer? We can already rule out this showing us events from Mass Effect 2, because Gamble himself denied that's what this is. When asked on Twitter if the trailer was only a recreation of the beginning events of Mass Effect 2, Gamble said, "Nah, it wasn't a Mass Effect 2 recreation, ... So if that's the case, then why is Liara going to Alchera, where Shepard died in the trilogy? And how would any of this connect to the potential Jardaan War hinted at throughout the trailer? Well, as unbelievable as it sounds, I'm pretty sure that what we're seeing in the final section of the trailer is an alternate universe version of Alchera. And this is crazily enough backed up with lore from Mass Effect 3 in this obscure conversation with EDI.
What's on your mind, EDI?
Liara recently requested assistance in calculating whether the Mass Effect is a phenomenon that occurs only in our universe, or in all possible universes. It may be that our laws of physics only occur in a finite area, a bubble if you will, in an ocean of other possibilities. I'm speculating whether, if you went far enough out, or created enough energy, you could reach a place where 1 + 1 = 3. Everything would change. All energy, all matter, all the underlying math of the universe would be unrecognizable to us.
Remember the planet named after Richard Feynman that we saw earlier? He was one of the most prominent physicists who believed in these many universe bubbles that Edie was talking about. As a quick summary of this quantum mechanics theory called the many-worlds interpretation, it proposes that when multiple outcomes are possible, the universe splits into multiple branches, spawning a new universe. This then creates a multiverse of bubbles, as Edie called it, which could even have different laws of physics and constraints, like 1 + 1 = 3. And weirdly enough, even Gamble himself hinted at this potential in Mass Effect 5 with this tweet. He randomly said, "Look, I can do anything I want. I can make Saturn 2 with less gas." And where could you do anything you want, like changing a known planet's gas composition? Based on Mass Effect lore, you could do it in an alternate universe, where maybe physics as we know it doesn't apply. So back to how this relates to the trailer. Very importantly, in this conversation with Edie, she revealed two things about these multiverse bubbles. The first was that Liara was aware of it potentially existing because she asked Edie to do calculations for her. And the second was that Edie believed if enough energy was created, they could reach another universe. Which leads me to believe what we're seeing in the trailer, only in this final section, is indeed an alternate universe, because enough energy was definitely created after the Crucible went off at the end of Mass Effect 3. As described in the Mass Effect wiki, the contributors to the Crucible's design realized that it required a means to massively amplify its energy in order to be effective, and that the Citadel possesses this capability, and so was incorporated into the schematics. And also, during Shepard's chat with the Catalyst, they also mentioned that the Crucible was little more than a crude but effective and adaptive power source. With the Citadel and the mass relays, however, it can release tremendous amounts of energy throughout the galaxy. So in this way, with a massive amount of energy created via the Crucible, it's possible that after Mass Effect 3, an alternate universe can be reached. And of course, Liara knows about this potential. So in this theory, the trailer's final section is showing us Liara's secret plan of going to an alternate universe and recovering this alternate Shepard for the Jardaan war ahead. Let's look at the last part of the trailer again with this in mind, and the three contradictions that make these alternate universe shenanigans make sense. Before we do that though, just a reminder that my Patreon is the best place to be in the lead up to N7 Day. Later this month, Comet members will get access to an exclusive theory about what the future of Mass Effect holds that I won't create a YouTube video on. And of course, N7 Day is coming up, which I will definitely be streaming live. Meteor members have their own dedicated chat channel that has highest priority during streams, so join that tier if you'd like that particular perk. To become a member, click the Patreon link in the description or the card over here, and if you're on mobile, you can also find the link in the pinned comment. Alrighty, with all that being said, let's get back to the three contradictions that make the alternate universe shenanigans make sense. During the debris section, we hear audio from the Reaper War, followed by the line, "Is anyone receiving this? We've lost contact." This likely represents the Crucible unleashing massive amounts of energy, which also likely ripped a wormhole leading to another universe. As a side note, the Crucible's dark energy beam would have also injected a lot of stars with the same dark energy that causes them to age quickly. This might then lead to more stars undergoing transitions to quantum wormholes, like in the Heleus cluster. And the dying star we saw earlier is likely showing us these wormholes beginning to form in the Milky Way. Next, we see the stars moving quickly towards us, then slowing down as if we've traveled with FTL speeds, and then slowed down upon reaching our destination. And while this destination is being reached, we see the Milky Way's galactic plane, which is our first contradiction if we were still in our universe. Since the trailer shows us as above Alchera, if we were in our original universe, we should only see the galactic plane in this view, as seen in Mass Effect 2. But we instead see it in this orientation, which literally makes no sense if we were still in our universe. And even more confusingly, at the end of the trailer, we see the galactic plane in the correct orientation from Alchera's point of view. So to me, there's only one explanation for this weird contradiction. During this transition, we're seeing Liara travel to an alternate universe using the new space vehicle. Then she lands on Alchera and recovers the Shepard still on its surface. And finally, she leaves Alchera's surface, returning to our original universe, which is why we see the galactic plane once again in the correct orientation. Since this visual of the galactic plane is moving, I take this to represent the wormhole that Liara traveled through, similar to how Interstellar's wormhole also showed a moving starscape within it. So with this really unhinged explanation, the first contradiction can be solved. Which brings us to the second contradiction. There shouldn't be dead Reapers on Alchera, if nothing will be canonized in Mass Effect 5. which Gamble's many tweets do indicate is a correct assumption. When a post on Twitter referenced if Black Ops 6 had multiple endings, Gamble pointedly quote-tweeted it, saying, "We like multiple endings." And when asked if those endings were happy, he said, "Depends." I view this as him saying that whether the endings are happy depends on us and our individual choices. So Gamble is hinting here that our ending choice for Mass Effect 3 will matter, which is emphasized again here. When asked about the discrepancy between more players playing Paragon than Renegade, Gamble said, "Yes, it's true that more people played Paragon, but it would have been meaningless if Renegade had not existed. The ability to choose is stronger than the number of people playing any option, in my opinion." This could be directly applied to the endings as well. Based on these 2021 stats from the Legendary Edition's initial release, the majority of people picked the Destroy ending. However, you could also view this as 55% of players not choosing the Destroy ending, which is why, in this theory, these Dead Reapers don't represent the Destroy ending being canon. It likely represents the Reapers being killed by a force other than Shepard in this alternate universe, which is only backed up further by the third contradiction, Shepard's helmet being on Alchera at all. Since one of this theory's 3 assumptions is to view each tease literally instead of metaphorically, then the helmet Liara is picking up shouldn't exist. And that's because in our universe, the player can pick up Shepard's original helmet from where they fell to Alchera's surface. However, in the trailer, Liara is clearly picking up Shepard's helmet, based on this carrying thumb brush. And if there exists a helmet that shouldn't be there, then likely this means that in this alternate universe, Shepard hasn't been recovered yet. Which actually makes sense because of the Dead Reapers from earlier. If, in this AU, the Reapers were killed by someone or something other than Shepard, then there would be no reason for the commander to be recovered. In our universe, the Elusive Man only rebuilt Shepard because of the Collector and Reaper threat. If the Reapers were already dead, then there'd be no reason to revive Shepard, leaving them still encased in ice on Alchera. And if that's the case, then Liara coming to this alternate version of Alchera makes sense. Part of Liara's secret plan is to recover this version of Shepard, likely because Earth is being threatened by the Jardaan, which also makes the appearance of these 3 make sense as well. Taking a look at this high-resolution version of the 3 characters, they very closely resemble members of the Tempest crew in Mass Effect Andromeda. This reddish Solarian could be Callow, this middle figure with the reflective helmet is very likely Ryder, and the Krogan is probably Drac. Their presence with Liara only further makes a Jardaan war even more likely, since they have the most Jardaan experience out of anyone in Mass Effect. And they also could have arrived to the Milky Way the same way as the Jardaan, through the Heleus cluster black hole acting as a quantum wormhole. So to me, solving these 3 contradictions can only be done by viewing the final section of the trailer in this unhinged way. And this type of explanation could help interpret the voices we hear right before reaching this alternate universe. Voice 1 probably said, "Emitted probe in A." If a wormhole was ripped into a different universe, then this could be a probe emitted into one of these phenomena. As a side note we'll get to shortly, this also implies that there are other wormholes named B, C, etc. Voice 2 saying anomaly readings all across known space could either refer to other wormhole rips or potentially Jardaan ships arriving to the Milky Way. Voice 3 likely said, "It's by the Ark." This reference to Ark could relate to the return of the Tempest crew to the Milky Way in one of the Andromeda Initiative's arcs. Voice 4 was either "they do match" or "they doomed us," which can be taken 2 ways with this theory. "They do match" could mean the alternate universe's Alchera matched ours with it having a deceased Shepard on its surface. Or "they doomed us" could reference the Jardaan wiping out Earth's defense force around the Canon relay. And finally, Voice 5 probably said, "upon an unknown horizon." This could mean basically anything, like being upon an unknown horizon of a wormhole, or the unknown horizon of a large war ahead. The beauty of these voices is that it can apply to any theory, even an unhinged one like this one. And as a quick roundup, here's where the theory currently stands. The next Mass Effect's villains are likely the Jardaan, i.e. a group of Protheans from Andromeda. The plot will likely start with them arriving from a wormhole connected to the Heleus cluster, the Geth making first contact with them, and humanity messing with quantum phenomena. We'll also probably see a lot of Andromeda connections, like with the arcs. Then, the first part of Mass Effect 5 will be the Jardaan annihilating Alliance ships by the Canon relay, dooming Earth to be trapped within its own system. And finally, Liara's secret plan of saving Earth, and likely the galaxy, is to go to an alternate universe, recover that Shepard from Alchera, and return to our universe. Now, being honest with y'all, this theory with the trailer alone isn't the strongest it could be. However, once we add the secret timeline of every N7 day since 2020 being tied to each trailer tease, the theory gets stronger and stronger. and it helps give us clarity on why Liara is desperate enough to grab an alternate Shepard in the first place. So with 4 and 7 days linking everything from Mass Effect 5 together, we'll start with the first tease from N7 Day 2020, which is tied to the beginning of the trailer's timeline. The most prominent hint here is the space vehicle we also saw in the trailer, and I believe this is tied to the Wormholes part of the trailer, because likely this vehicle is for the exclusive use of wormhole travel. When saving this tease's image file directly from the N7 Day blog it's from, the file's name is MUD Skipper, which could stand for Multi-Dimensional Skipper, i.e. skipping around to alternate dimensions or points in space. As to the people here, that's where the theory really shines. These 3 silhouettes are from Mordin, Thane, and Jal. They all match the character profiles for them using in-game assets. However, the ones for Mordin and Thane are literally horizontally flipped. Now doesn't that sound familiar? When the galactic plane from before was flipped, it represented entering another universe. Perhaps these flipped versions of Mordin and Thane also mean we'll see alternate versions of them in Mass Effect 5. And bringing back voice 1 from earlier, it had said emitted probe in A. Potentially, other wormholes to alternate universes, like B or C, could lead to the recovery of previous characters that have died. As to Jal's silhouette, it could simply be there to show that the Tempest crew will be in-game, which we of course already saw in the trailer. These 3 characters help hammer home the Milky Way and Andromeda both being involved, which the beginning of the trailer implied already. Also in the tease is a character off to the side, very separated from the other 3. I assume this will be a new character we'll be introduced to and isn't guessable at this point. As to the planet itself, it most closely resembles Elaaden from the Heleus cluster. It's the hottest planet in-game at 52 degrees Celsius, hence the water mirages on the ground. And it's also the moon of a gas giant, which we see in the sky here. They could be hinting at Elaaden because potentially the wormhole the Jardaan and Tempest crew use can be traversed both ways, meaning that Mass Effect 5 could feature both Milky Way and Andromeda environments, again mirroring the trailer. So that's the first N7 Day hint that directly connected to the beginning of the 2020 trailer. And funnily enough, this trend continues, with N7 Day 2021 being the next tease in the secret timeline. Let's look at the Geth poster with the theory that the Geth likely made first contact with the Jardaan. In the poster, there are 4 sections of interest. The SFX ship at the bottom, the crew of 4 walking towards the crater that has seized Geth and Quarian bodies, and the actual crater itself. The SFX ship looks like an Alliance ship because of its N7-esque vibe. The red, white, and black match the N7 color scheme to a T. And fun fact, the original codename for Mass Effect 1 during development was SFX, so this is a nice nod to those roots. Likely, this ship belongs to an N7, or simply an Alliance member in this group of 4. Now with all the Liara teases, I'm betting this blue and white figure is her, because that matches her usual color palette. And as to this middle figure, I had previously thought it was Ryder, but it's more likely an Alliance member who had control of the SFX ship. Based on the white color scheme and maybe wearing a helmet, my guess would be Miranda. As to the other 2, it's pure hopium, but I'm thinking this red Krogan is Rex and this gray Turian is Garrus. The main point here though, hopium aside, is that this is a very diverse group, which makes me think they're here for a reason, like a meeting between races to discuss something important. And as to where they're holding this meeting, I think the bodies around the crater hold the answer. Because of the inactive Geth platforms and Quarian bodies littered everywhere, I'm thinking that this planet is Rannoch, which the 2 races fought over in Mass Effect 3. Now, for the Geth crater itself. Based on the trailer's timeline, this tease is connected to the Geth making first contact with the Jardaan. And the Geth crater actually tells us why and how they made first contact. Because this tiny little pond perfectly matches a Geth camera from the Mass Effect comic Discovery. Since these 2 images are pretty much identical, I'm thinking the comic holds clues for the Geth's first contact with the Jardaan. And the biggest clue to that is what the Geth in the comic did with 3 mass relays. Combining the relays with strange technology, the Geth created what the Quarians were calling the Coalesce Array. And with this array that acted as an FTL telescope, they were searching for something beyond the Milky Way. The Quarian narrating this said that the Geth weren't interested in Andromeda, and also showed him to find a homeworld way beyond where anyone else was looking. Which likely means, based on this theory anyway, that the Geth used this FTL telescope to find wormholes. That'd be one of the simplest ways of finding a new homeworld without being interested in Andromeda, which would make the Geth the first race to discover wormholes in the Milky Way. And if these Geth then traversed the wormholes successfully, then that would make them much more likely to come into contact with an unknown race, like the Jardaan. which is exactly what the trailer hinted at. This first contact also likely led them to start wearing clothes for the first time, but we'll get to that later on in the secret timeline. So taken as a whole, I believe that the Geth poster means this. What we're seeing here is a meeting between significant Milky Way races about the Geth's knowledge and traversal of wormholes. This meeting might also include the Geth's likely first contact with the Jardaan. And if we believe the Hopium, then this group of Miranda, Rex, Garrus, and Liara could be representing their people at this meeting. Miranda would represent the Alliance, Rex the Krogan, Garrus the Turians, and Liara the Shadow Broker Network. And of course, the one who had the most experience with dark energy and aging stars was Tali, who might be leading this meeting with the Geth on Rannoch. Alright, back to the secret timeline. The next trailer hint was about humanity messing with quantum phenomena. And what do you know? N7 Day 2022 focused on a new human-made relay. There's definitely a pattern to this madness, which means we'll be able to predict N7 Day 2025's tease. But we'll get there when we get there. For now, the relay tease from N7 Day 2022. First, some context. In that year's blog, there was a message at the very bottom that said this: "There's something we want you to have a look at. We've intercepted some strange footage from one of the monitoring stations in known space. It could be nothing, but... ... And of course, the strange footage included this new relay that's currently under construction. The bottom left text confirms that what we're seeing is a relay being constructed, along with the ship captain name Subnavarch Soarai Zillion Jones. This name looks like a combination of human and Quarian cultures, so maybe Mass Effect 5 will feature cross-species backgrounds. Under For Interior Use Only, we also see SA and 314. SA likely stands for Systems Alliance, so this relay is being made by humanity. As to why they're building it, I think that 314 holds the answer. In Mass Effect lore, the significance of 314 is tied to humanity's first contact war with the Turians. This was also called the Relay 314 incident. So this relay's purpose likely has to do with leading somewhere unknown, where first contact with an unknown race could take place. As this one fan asked on Twitter, where does this new design lead, with Gamble replying, "A most excellent question. This is what we need to be asking ourselves. Why build a new relay? And where does this new design lead?" Well, based on this theory, the answers would be to traverse unknown areas of space, like for example, quantum wormholes, like the trailer implies. Also, based on the secret timeline, if this relay construction took place after someone from the Alliance heard about the Geth's wormhole discovery, I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to take matters into their own hands and investigate wormholes on their own. Which actually makes the color scheme on the relay make sense too, because these colors are associated with Cerberus, not the Alliance. At the beginning of Mass Effect 3, Arcturus Station was wiped out, which was the HQ of the Alliance's parliament. This effectively eliminated all the important members of the Alliance's top brass, leaving a huge power vacuum at the top of the Alliance military, which would be the perfect opportunity for Cerberus to swoop in and control the Alliance with their own agents. And we might be seeing Cerberus's infiltration of the Alliance with this new relay in their colors. And as to what Cerberus wants to do with this new relay, the trailer holds the answer. They likely want to investigate quantum phenomena, just like the physicist Feynman was studying, which connects directly to the audio we hear of the relay footage. Now, while this could mean anything, my bet is on it being the sounds escaping from a black hole. Back in 2022, NASA released what a black hole sounds like, which went like this. Well, that sounds familiar. So with the footage likely hinting at black holes, I think this relay's purpose is to traverse where a black hole could lead, which is of course wormholes, likely of the quantum variety. Now obviously, we've already gotten hints that the Jardaan in the Heleus cluster will traverse wormholes to come to the Milky Way. However, I think that the connection could go both ways, with travel to one leading to the Milky Way in the 2190s, and travel the other way leading to Andromeda in the 2820s. I'm thinking the 2190s is a possible date because of the relay's date here showing 110790, which means that seeing the Tempest crew on the alternate Alchera here is taking place in the 2190s. We'll get to even more hints that suggest this 2190s date later. For now though, let's finish off what this relay's exact purpose is. Because of the docking sections here, I'm leaning towards this relay acting as a transportation vehicle across a black hole's event horizon. In this way, the entire relay could move into a wormhole, taking everything in the docks with it, as opposed to individual ships moving one at a time. Alright, now it's time to discuss the audio hidden beneath the droning noise, because it's likely a conversation between Liara and the Geth who traversed a wormhole from earlier.
Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate. I can see the difference. How did we miss that? Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. That's worse they must I can see it.
Now weirdly enough, right when the screen has a strange visual blip, we hear dual Liara audio saying, "I can see it, how did we miss this?"
Not to underestimate. I can see the defiance. How did we miss that?
This could be sound wave interference from a nearby black hole with Liara's audio, causing it to blip at the same time. As to what Liara is saying, it works with the theory really well. If a meeting on Rannoch took place with important heads of state about wormhole traversal, then the Council would be furious if the Systems Alliance was building a relay to traverse one. In the lore, the Council restricts any race from activating new relays, so naturally, they'd be furious at the Alliance creating their own relay to traverse somewhere new. Liara's nod to not underestimating human defiance also meshes well with the trailer's timeline of humanity standing as partners in the galaxy. This last phrase of their defiance being endearing is probably Liara reminiscing on Shepard's own defiance against the Council in Mass Effect 1. Now, the most interesting part of this footage to me is when Liara says, "How did we miss this?" With Liara being the Shadow Broker, she should have fingers in all the pies, but somehow she doesn't in the Alliance. In this theory, I think her lack of Alliance information is tied to both Cerberus and the new N7, but we'll discuss those details with the N7 Day 2023 teases. For now, we have to discuss how Liara is even viewing this monitoring footage, because this is technically for interior use by the Systems Alliance only. However, to solve this conundrum, I think once again Gamble gave us a clue. When the Mass Effect Legendary Edition went on sale in 2024, he said that there's an extra game worth of DLC content in there, but to make sure you play Lair of the Shadow Broker. And in the Lair of the Shadow Broker DLC, we can see how Liara was viewing the Alliance's footage.
What does this console do?
This is the video surveillance access point. I've queued up the archive footage you requested on your last visit, Shadow Broker.
And in the video archive, we saw footage from places like Omega, the Citadel, Ilium, and even Tuchanka. So what we're seeing here is likely the intercepted footage from the Alliance to the Shadow Broker's video surveillance access point, which the video file name for the relay footage also backs up. When downloading the file from the N7 Day blog, this is what pops up. SA Intercept Cytherium System Doc 314. SA Intercept likely stands for this footage being intercepted from the Systems Alliance to Liara's console. We don't know of any system in-game called Cytherium, but that's clearly where this is. And Dock 314 could refer to this relay acting like a dock for spaceships to travel inside. Alright, so that's everything for this tease, which clearly had a lot packed in. There is one final clue related to this N7 stripe in the corner, but we'll get to that shortly. For now, before getting to the N7 Day 2023 section of the timeline, let's tackle a couple other teases from 2022 that help confirm more alternate universe shenanigans along with Mass Effect 5's timeline. This concept art piece from N7 Day 2022 very closely resembles Ilium. The building's pink lighting and overall building shapes are pretty much the same from Mass Effect 2, except the overall lighting in the illustration makes no sense. It shouldn't be red at all, but rather bluish, which makes me think that this Ilium is not one from our universe, but rather a flipped version in an AU. As to the symbols around the picture, it confirms how both the Milky Way and Heleus cluster are likely settings for the next game. We can see two symbols here for Cerberus and Omega, which are both from the Milky Way, and two more symbols both from Kadara Port in the Heleus cluster. One of the sneakiest teases here is actually on this building, which reads SFX-5. Remember how earlier the ship was named SFX, which was the codename for Mass Effect? This tease also uses that codename to tell us fans the internal name of the next game is currently Mass Effect 5. Alright, that's everything in this concept art piece, but there was also a second one from 2022 that's probably showing us another Asari planet. These elegantly shaped buildings very closely closely match those found on Thessia in Mass Effect 3. They have the same sloped bottom edges, and most importantly, the hollow middles. What we're seeing in the illustration is probably a space elevator, similar to the one Shepard took up to the Citadel in Mass Effect 3. Alright, now to Mass Effect 5's timeline. Because of the characters wearing masks here, I think that the air pollution on Thessia is pretty bad, which actually fits a timeline right after the Reaper War really well. When Palaven was first bombarded by the Reapers, this was in the planet's description. The dust and smoke from pulverized cities is now a breathing hazard across much of the planet. And we know from Thessia's destruction by the Reapers that there was plenty of dust and smoke across the planet's surface, which means that this concept art for Mass Effect 5 could be showing us Thessia post-Reaper War, where the planet is still suffering from breathing hazards, meaning a timeline in the Milky Way during the 2190s is very possible. Now, if this is the case, then obviously the Mass Effect 3 endings will have to be resolved somehow. But since that discussion isn't Tease related, I won't go over how they can solve that in this video. But you can check out this video if you're interested in how the endings can be solved in 3 simple steps. Okay, we're finally in the home stretch of the secret timeline. And this next section on N7 Day 2023 and 24 kicks off the trailer's connection to the arcs. On N7 Day 2023, we saw this video of an N7 walking down a corridor. And while speculation was rampant about who it could be, it was actually N7 Day 2024 that gave us the answer. In a crossover event with Dragon Age the Veilguard, players received items that matched what the new N7 was wearing. And very crucially, it came with this note by Lace Harding. This is significant because Harding was voiced by Heleus, the same voice actress as Liara. And the note itself is half told through Liara's point of view. It says, "I guess this chest got lost in the fade, and someone shepherded it to our doorstep. Is it just me, or does the armor look somehow familiar, like something an old friend would wear?" And obviously, with the hilarious shepherded reference aside, Harding, aka Liara, is referring to Shepard. They were the only N7 Liara knew, and who she'd refer to as an old friend. But it's a little more complicated than this N7 simply being Shepard, because the coat itself is also a tease based on what it's called, which is Spectre of Battles Past. Now, based on the lore, this is one crazy tease. There's only one person in Mass Effect who is both an N7 and a Spectre, and that was, of course, Commander Shepard. However, the coat was named Spectre, not Spectre. And this spelling of Spectre means something completely different. It actually stands for Ghost, which makes this coat's actual name Ghost of Battles Past. So what this implies is that this tease from N7 Day 2023 is showing us not Shepard, but Shepard's ghost, which based on the other teases from that N7 Day, means that this is showing us that a second Shepard will return. Again, not in a form we'd expect. When the N7 first made an appearance, everyone was rejoicing at this being a character we know, or potentially the new protagonist. And Gamble, who was very tuned into the discourse online, said, "Not everything is as it seems." So to me, I view this statement as us interpreting the N7 initially in an incorrect way. And as to how we should have been thinking about it, Gamble likely pointed us in the right direction with his next tweet. About the N7, this fan mused, "So it's a person and not a robot/AI?" And Gamble replied, "What's a person?" I personally think this means the fan was on the right track, that this N7 is in fact an AI, which would match the coat's name from earlier. What else could represent Shepard's ghost than Shepard in AI form, making this new N7 Shepard's literal ghost of battles past? When looking at the N7 in the illustration, there are a few characteristics that make this idea legit. The general helmet shape is pretty thin, there are missing gaps at the top of it that wouldn't accommodate most races' heads, and there's potentially speakers on the side here for the AI to project a voice. Couple that with the visor looking evil, and of course the high collar of doom here that usually signifies an antagonistic character, and I'm leaning towards this indeed being an evil AI, which means that the Alliance, aka Cerberus, has made an AI in Shepard's likeness. Based on what happened at the end of the Reaper War, this checks out. Because so many Alliance soldiers fought and died during the war, naturally, the Systems Alliance would be looking for quick replacement soldiers, like AIs. And with Shepard being the best soldier they ever had, making an AI based on the commander would be something very plausible. In this way, the commander's Ghost of Battles Past would return, carrying all of Shepard's battle data and prowess with it. Now, I also have a theory about why the Alliance would do this, based on lore from the Mass Effect Andromeda book, Initiation. In the book, the founder of the Andromeda Initiative, Gian Garson, revealed to Cora Harper that human-based groups like the Alliance are all just marching to the baton of an invisible conductor. Garson also implied that this invisible conductor was desperate for Alec Ryder's creation of Sam, an integratable AI that can enhance a user's physiology. So basically, how this affects what we're seeing now is that someone who controls the Alliance is very AI forward in thinking. which means that the Alliance making AIs into soldiers is not out of the realm of possibility, especially when taking into account that Cerberus, a very pro-AI group, likely controls the Alliance. As to who this invisible conductor controlling the Alliance is, it's likely the person who murdered Gian Garson, with that person being the Benefactor, who's also someone likely involved with Cerberus. I won't get into that in depth here though, suffice it to say that I wouldn't be surprised if this Shepard AI works for the Benefactor. Now, as to what this Shepard AI's purpose is, I think Gamble also gave us a nudge in the right direction with this tweet. When this fan asked, whoever this person is, are they on that broken relay from the earlier teasers? Gamble replied, maybe it's connected. And if we go back to the Cerberus looking relay from earlier, there is in fact an N7 stripe in the bottom left corner of the monitor. It's kind of hard to see, but it's definitely there. And if we assume this does represent the Shepard AI, then literally all the other teases from N7A 2023 make sense. On that day, we had also received 3 other hints by inputting the correct access codes into the appropriate URLs. And if we examine these teases from the lens of the Shepard AI, we can start to figure out its purpose. First off, these forward slashes in front of each line looks exactly like how an AI terminal interprets data line by line. So I believe this represents the Shepard AI executing its machine code in real time, which means that if it is receiving these encryptions while watching the relay being constructed, then the Shepard AI just received an Andromeda distress signal in real time, which makes the wormhole theory even stronger, because if the signal was received from the year 2819, which was the correct answer to this redacted line, then it literally contradicts the year's date on the footage ending in 90. The backwards time travel from Andromeda to the Milky Way is likely confirmed with this strange contradiction. And on top of that, we can assume that the Shepard AI is receiving the distress signal while it monitors this relay, because it also interpreted the audio transcript of Liara saying, although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. So we can take 2 major things out of this. The first is that something is happening in the year 2819 in Andromeda that would cause the people there to send out a distress signal. This is likely something to do with the Jardaan returning to the Heleus cluster and beginning their assault on the Initiative or the Angara. And the second major thing is that the Shepard AI, who works for the Cerberus-controlled Alliance, is aware of Liara stealing the monitoring footage from them. This also makes sense, because if the Alliance is controlled by the antagonistic Benefactor, then Liara would both have trouble obtaining the footage and thus need to steal it against the Alliance's wishes. Which brings us to the second code that the Shepard AI goes through, which is reviewing the briefing materials on official Alliance comms channels. This is likely when the Benefactor gives the Shepard AI its orders on the audio transcript of Liara it just intercepted, which leads to the final code of it undergoing a warning as it's been told that a security breach has been detected. This security breach is likely Liara intercepting the Alliance footage of their new relay. It then receives orders to contact the Systems Alliance, which then explains everything we see in the video of it walking. And knowing what we know of the Benefactor, who had ordered Gian Garson to be killed, its likely orders to the Shepard AI would be in the same vein, to eliminate the person who had breached the Systems Alliance security, which means the Shepard AI's purpose is to eliminate Liara, hence why it pulls out a silencer pistol as very evil sounding music plays. As to what Liara is up to, she's likely busy dealing with the Andromeda distress signal, because in the illustration of the N7's coat is a table that probably includes Liara and her new wormhole Geth buddy, along with Jal and Ryder, which would coincidentally fit right into the part of the trailer about Andromeda's Arc 6. Back to the table with the group of 4, Gamble had liked this tweet that suggested we were seeing Liara and her Geth bodyguard. So this is probably Liara, and this is likely the Geth who's made first contact with the Jardaan via their wormhole travels. Very importantly, this Geth is now wearing clothes, which in this theory confirms they've made contact with the Jardaan. This is because in the Heleus cluster, Remtech usually requires an organic-synthetic partnership to operate it. So assuming that the Jardaan are also organic-synthetic hybrids of their own, they likely believe that this type of hybridization should be something to strive for. Remember how I went over how the Jardaan view themselves as godlike because of their creation of worlds and entire organic races? I wouldn't be surprised if their superior ways of thinking caused them to influence the Geth to be more organic. Hence why this synthetic Geth has pursued the organic tradition of clothing. As to these other 2 characters, it's probably Jal and Ryder who sent out the Andromeda distress signal. We had likely seen Ryder's reflective helmet before in the trailer, and I think we're seeing it again here. And of course, we had seen a hint of Jal before as well, so this is probably him here too. So what's likely taking place here is the aftermath of the Andromeda distress signal the Shepard AI picked up on. Based on this theory, the Jardaan probably attacked the Heleus cluster, causing the Tempest crew to send out a distress signal. And after sending that signal, the entire crew, Ryder and Jal included, traveled through the Heleus cluster's quantum wormhole, returning to around 2190 and meeting up with Liara here. If that's what happened, then Jal being distressed here checks out. In this theory, the Jardaan attacking the Heleus cluster would include Jal's people, the Angara. And if this Geth is pro-Jardaan based on their attire, then Jal pointing angrily at them makes sense. Jal is probably trying to impress upon Liara the incoming danger of the Jardaan coming to the Milky Way, i.e. he's trying to warn her about what we see next in the trailer after the Arc 6 tease. The Jardaan are going to follow Ryder and crew into the quantum wormhole and rain destruction down on the Milky Way, which includes Earth. And this table of 4 likely represents what Mass Effect 5's plot will center around. Will the Milky Way's races submit to the forced organic synthetic ways of the Jardaan? Or will they reject them? And most importantly, this table also represents what I believe will be the game's theme, the existential question of what's a person that Gamble stated before. This table features an organic race manufactured by the Jardaan, and a manufactured synthetic race likely being heavily influenced by them too. Are they both considered people? Is this Geth considered a person now that they wear clothes? What about the Shepard AI? Are they considered a person if they walk and talk like the old commander? Maybe the one who will decide that will be a person that isn't even from this universe. If Liara brings back a Shepard from an alternate universe to help fight against the Jardaan, are they really Shepard? Is our Shepard represented by their body, or their memories, or their soul? I believe this will be the heart of Mass Effect 5. And with all of the teases finally analyzed, here are this theory's final predictions. Mass Effect 5's main plot will center around a theme of what makes a person who they are. And the best villains to do this would be the Jardaan, who are forcing their organic synthetic ways across the Milky Way and the Heleus cluster. This would make the setting of the game include both galaxies, but the Milky Way would be set in the 2190s and the Heleus cluster in the 2820s thanks to the quantum wormholes. As a secondary plot, the Cerberus-controlled Systems Alliance is making former now-deceased soldiers like Shepard into AIs, once again playing into the theme of what a person really is. And of course, Liara's secret plan to deal with all of this. She will likely bring together the dual protagonists to deal with this threat, Ryder and a Shepard from an alternate universe. Ryder would be best equipped to deal with the Jardaan threat since they can already operate their technology, and Shepard would be ideal against both the Jardaan and Cerberus threat, if they are indeed our hero of the Citadel, making them the main protagonist. And of course, this theory's final prediction is based on the secret timeline itself. If this trailer trend continues, then this year's N7-Day tease will probably relate to the debris field, meaning we'll see the Jardaan finally arrive in the Milky Way and rain destruction down on Earth's defense force. And of course, we'll likely see hints of the Shepard AI's assassination attempt on Liara. Alright, that's all the predictions I've got this time around. I know it probably sounds absolutely unhinged, but what if it's true? Liara?
No, but the truth is boring.
Well, even if it's not true, I'm sure this N7-Day will bring another new tease to slot into everybody's theories. Until then, watch this video next on how there might be multiple Shepards in the Mass Effect TV show. See you there.
Logging you out, Shepard.